So here I am. I go into the Golden Pear yesterday, and as I'm going into the Golden Pear, I had an experience this past week. You may be wondering, why does he have bandages all on his arms? Well, it's because of this right here. This is what my arm looks like underneath these bandages, and so I got into a little bit of poison ivy. A little bit, maybe an understatement, but there's stuff oozing out of my arms this morning, left and right. And so I figured if I put a little bandage on, it might be a little bit more pleasant for you. Well, I had a bandage on yesterday after I got out of the ER. I went to Golden Pear because I'm just starving to death. You can get rid of that picture because the more I look at it, the grosser I feel as well. But as I went in there and I had some bandages on my arm, it was amazing how many folks at church that I met there at the Golden Pear. Papa, you wouldn't believe this, but your son-in-law was there as well. And would you know, he would not shake my hand. Your daughter would not even get close to me. They just walked the other way. They were like, there is no way in the world that I am coming near you at all. We saw another group of folks, and they were like, hey, let me wave at you, let me do this. But instead of them wanting to come and love on the preacher and say, hey, I'm so glad to see you, and I'm excited about you being here. No, that is not what they ended up doing. They wanted nothing to do with me. In fact, when I went to the hospital, Dr. Bowden was there, and he was called in special by an RN because she wanted him to see what was going on my arm. She was excited. You know, he was a hunter and all, and so she was excited to show him what real poison ivy from Louisiana looked like. And so it was an exciting time. But what I realized was that every person that I've met, and the people that even, at church, Brother Whalen won't even shake my hand. It's like, he just kind of waves from afar. Every one of those people, what they would rather do is wanted nothing at all to do with me. They didn't mind if they just kind of threw me away. It's like, no, I don't want whatever's on your arm. I don't want it crawling off your leg or off your stomach. You just keep all that to yourself. And so for a little while, I have been a throwaway. I wonder if in your life, do you have any throwaways in your life? People who something about that person, about their personality, about their background, there's something about that person that really makes you avoid them at all costs. It really is somebody that you don't want to even deal with. There's too much drama involved with them. It's too much work to be in a relationship with them. They just get all these little, there's just too much stuff. So sometimes I wonder if you and I have any throwaways. Maybe it's because of their race. Maybe it's because of their finances. Maybe it's because of their educational status and where they've been in their life. Maybe it's just that you look at them and they are nothing to you but a throwaway. And I wonder this morning as we look in Jonah chapter 4, if there are any throwaways in your life. Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he could love me, a sinner condemned unclean. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. Behold, he comes, riding on a cloud, shining like the sun, as a trumpet calls. So lift your voice, yield to believe, out of Zion's hill salvation comes. Welcome to Westside Emmanuel Baptist Church, the church that loves God and loves people. We're in the heart of Bogalusa with Bogalusa on our heart. We look forward to you joining us in person sometime soon as we worship the Lord together. I will boast in Christ alone, His righteousness, and not my own. And I will cling to Christ my hope. His mercy reigns now and forever.
see the work of your hands. Galaxies spinning a heavenly dance. Oh God, all that you are is so overwhelming. And I hear the sound of your voice. All at once it's a gentle and thundering noise. Oh God, all that you are is so overwhelming. I delight myself in you, captivated by your beauty. I'm overwhelmed by you. God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of mercy. I'm overwhelmed by you. I want y'all to sing this with us. You are beautiful. You are beautiful. You are beautiful. Oh God, there is no one more beautiful. You are beautiful. God, you are the most beautiful. We know He's wonderful. You are wonderful. You are wonderful. Oh God, there is no one more wonderful. You are wonderful. God, you are the most wonderful. You are glorious. You are glorious. Oh God, there is no one more glorious. You are glorious. God, you are most glorious. I delight myself in you, in the glory of your presence. I'm overwhelmed by you. God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of mercy. I'm overwhelmed by you. I'm overwhelmed by you.
So here I am. I go into the Golden Pear yesterday, and as I'm going into the Golden Pear, I had an experience this past week. You may be wondering, why does he have bandages all on his arms? Well, it's because of this right here. This is what my arm looks like underneath these bandages, and so I got into a little bit of poison ivy. A little bit, maybe an understatement, but there's stuff oozing out of my arms this morning left and right, and so I figured if I put a little bandage on, it might be a little bit more pleasant for you. Well, I had a bandage on yesterday after I got out of the ER. I went to Golden Pear because I'm just starving to death. You can get rid of that picture because the more I look at it, the grosser I feel as well. But as I went in there and I had some bandages on my arm, it was amazing how many folks at church that I met there at the Golden Pear. Papa, you wouldn't believe this, but your son-in-law was there as well. And would you know, he would not shake my hand. Your daughter would not even get close to me. They just walked the other way. They were like, there is no way in the world that I am coming near you at all. We saw another group of folks, they were like, hey, let me wave at you, let me do this. But instead of them wanting to come and love on the preacher and say, hey, I'm so glad to see you and I'm excited about you being here. No, that is not what they ended up doing. They wanted nothing to do with me. In fact, when I went to the hospital, Dr. Bowden was there, and he was there, and he was called in special by an RN because she wanted him to see what was going on my arm. She was excited. You know, he was a hunter and all, so she was excited to show him what real poison ivy from Louisiana looked like. And so it was an exciting time. But what I realized was that every person that I've met, and the people that even, at church, Brother Whalen won't even shake my hand. It's like, he just kind of waves from afar. car. Every one of those people, what they would rather do is wanted nothing at all to do with me. They didn't mind if they just kind of threw me away. It's like, no, I don't want whatever's on your arm. I don't want it crawling off your leg or off your stomach. You just keep all that to yourself. And so for a little while, I have been a throwaway. I wonder if in your life, do you have any throwaways in your life? People who something about that person, about their personality, about their background, there's something about that person that really makes you avoid them at all costs. It really is somebody that you don't want to even deal with. There's too much drama involved with them. It's too much work to be in a relationship with them. They just get all these little, there's just too much stuff. So sometimes I wonder if you and I have any throwaways. Maybe it's because of their race. Maybe it's because of their finances. Maybe it's because of their educational status and where they've been in their life. Maybe it's just that you look at them and they are nothing to you but a throwaway. The Ninevites, as you turn in your Bible to the book of Jonah, the Ninevites were nothing to Jonah except for a bunch of throwaways. He despised them. He hated them. And not only did Jonah do that, but the Ninevites were the capital city of Assyria. Assyria were people who hated the Jews. They'd been in war with them over and over again and numerous times. They hated the Jews, and Jonah, as a good Jew, hated the Ninevites. Beyond all recognition, he hated the Ninevites. And they were nothing but cruel and violent and oppressive, and they were nothing to him but throwaways. He hated these throwaways so much that he was willing to rather run away from God than deal with those throwaways that were in his life. And I wonder this morning, as we look in Jonah chapter 4, if there are any throwaways in your life. Folks that you would say, you know what, I don't want anything to do with these kind of folks. I don't want anything at all to happen good in a blessed way in their life. And so Jonah chapter 4. We're going to start in Jonah chapter 3. When you find that, would you stand with me in honor of the Lord and his word? We're going to start in verse 10 of Jonah chapter 3. That last verse in Jonah chapter 3. Jonah, called of God, ran away from the throwaways. He ran away from the Lord. He went into a ship. He kept on going down, 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 running away from God. There, storms come, thrown overboard. Huge fish swallows him whole. Inside that huge fish in Jonah chapter 2, we remember that he repents and he turns back to the Lord. In Jonah 3, he goes and preaches to these Ninevites. And then this is what happens in Jonah chapter 3, verse 10. It said, then God saw their works, the work of the Ninevites who repented, that they turned from their evil way. And God relented from the disaster that he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. And then look at what the response is of Jonah in Jonah chapter 4. Jonah says, but it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he became angry. We're going to figure that out in a moment why he did that. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for your people. Thank you, Father, that you are a God of runaways. You are a God of throwaways. You're a God of prophets who don't want anything to do with you, and then you are a God of the throwaways who no one in the world wants anything to do with them. So, Father, this morning, whether we are runaways or throwaways, would you just speak life to us in Jesus' name? Amen. Amen. Go ahead and be seated this morning. Jonah chapter 3, verse 10 is actually, for some scholars, it is actually one of the greatest revivals recorded in the Bible. In fact, there's about 120,000 more that were in this city of Nineveh. It took days to traverse across Nineveh. I mean, it was a huge city with a huge population. And then all of a sudden the Bible says that these folks experienced one of the greatest revivals of all of history there recorded. Were 120,000 from the king to the very lowest. Each one of them, they put sackcloth and ashes, and they turned their lives over to the Lord. It was an exciting time. You know what I would think? That of all of a sudden, we've got a population of what? 10,000, 12, 14, 15. It just kind of depends what area you're surrounding. Wouldn't it be amazing for us when we, during Easter Sunday, when we have, 12,000 people at the high school stadium and stuff, that's where we're hoping and praying about having our Easter services this year is at the high school football stadium to be able to just fit all the people that we've been praying about. And so wouldn't it be exciting if all the time, every person in Bogalusa, they filled up the visitor stand, they filled up the field, and they filled up the regular stands, if every one of those persons, all of a sudden they heard the gospel of Jesus Christ, and every one of them gave their life to Christ. Throughout Bogalusa, red and yellow, brown, black, and white, every one of them gave their life to Jesus Christ. From the very top to the very bottom, every one of them returned to the Lord and repented and turned their life to Christ. Wouldn't that be an okay thing? I mean, I'm just saying, wouldn't it be an awesome thing to see God move in such a way to where every single person here in Bogalusa would give their life to Jesus Christ? Now look, if we think to ourselves, well, that could never happen, well, they thought to themselves, it could never happen in Nineveh either. Because this was a place of wickedness, a place where they would cut off people's heads and just kind of put them right on display at the city gate, so that when you came into the city, you realized that this was the place that they did not play around. They would burn you to death, they'd have you just hung everywhere. And so these were folks that were oppressive and wicked, and yet every single last one of them, even the cattle had to put sackcloth and ashes on them. I mean, it was like a serious time in the life of Nineveh when they gave their life to Jesus Christ. Now, you would think as a preacher, I mean, you know what, my head, Dwayne already says my head's kind of big anyway. He said the reason why I got poison ivy is because I was allergic to hard work, because I was cutting hedges. And so that love those good kind of friends that I have here in this church. But you know, my head may get kind of swollen if I were like, man, every person in Bogalusa gave their life to Jesus Christ. And what if it was just a message as short as Jonah's? He just went into the city, he was walking, he said, 40 days and Nineveh will be destroyed. That was his whole message. That was his sermon. Now some of y'all were like, well, I wish some of your sermons would be like that short as well. But if it meant that, you know what, the entire city would get saved, I'd say 8 words, 10 words, 6,000 words if it really mattered to see people come to know Jesus Christ. You would think that this guy would be excited to see people give their life to Christ, but that was not the case for Jonah. Jonah chapter 4, verse 1, did you see what it says? In Jonah chapter 4, verse 1, after one of the greatest revivals recorded in all of history, all of a sudden it says, but it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he became angry. So, verse 2 says, he prayed to the Lord and said, "Our Lord, was not this what I said when I was still in my country? Therefore I fled previously to Tarshish." When it says that he was exceedingly angry, disappointed, the Hebrew actually means he was hot. He was hot. That's the actual word they use it. And this guy was hot. He was hot. I don't know about you, but with my Sergeant Major Dad, if he ever angered me, I usually didn't try to respond if I was hot. Because my heat and his heat would not be the same level of heatness. And so he would be a little hotter, and if I didn't even dare do it, but if I try to put a little bit of my own heat, you know, I'm angry. No, that's not a good idea. Now Jonah just lost his ever-loving mind, because he came in there and he said, "No, I am displeased that you would do that for these Ninevites. I am hot. I'm just so hot that what? He said, I knew this is what I said when I was still in my country. Therefore I fled previously to Tarshish." Have you ever wondered why did Jonah flee and run away from God? Was it maybe because Nineveh was kind of like ISIS? It was a dangerous territory, and so maybe he feared for his life. I mean, that would make sense. He feared going there because maybe they would kill him. Or maybe it was just too long of a journey. You know, 500 plus miles to get to Nineveh from where he was. That was a pretty long journey. Of course, he's willing to go to Tarshish, which was 2,500 miles in the opposite direction. You know, usually disobeying God will get you a whole lot further and takes a whole lot longer than if we would just obey God to begin with. I mean, 500 miles or 2,500 miles. He just went the total opposite direction. So maybe it was distance. No, we get a glimpse into his heart. We open up this guy's heart in the remainder of this verse. Look at what it says in verse 2. The reason why he fled, the reason why he ran away, the reason why he didn't want anything to do with the Ninevites was in verse 2, where it says, "For I know that you are a gracious and merciful God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, one who relents from doing harm." It wasn't that he was scared. It wasn't that he was, worried about his life or worried about the distance. The reason why he said, the reason why I fled away from you, God, was because you are gracious and merciful and slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness. Now, he liked that for himself, and you and I like that for ourselves. Don't you like it that God is gracious? I mean, we ought to like the fact that, man, God is gracious enough and merciful enough that every one of our sins, that he would remove them as far as the east is from the west, that he would forgive us and love us and care about us. It says there he's slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness. He's like, boy, you're getting all hot and bothered over this, but I am slow to anger. Because if God was not slow to anger, if he was quick to anger like some of our tempers in here, we would have been killed, destroyed a long time. Amen. Woo! I mean, just think about it. I mean, some of y'all, boy, just do one little thing and your head just explodes. Steam, volcanoes are erupting. God says, no, I'm slow to anger, and I'm abundant in loving kindness who relents from doing harm. This is what this guy knew. He knew that God was a God of second chances. He knew that I'm a runaway prophet, but God swallowed me whole with his love and his mercy. And I know that God has changed my life and done a work inside my life. I know that God has been working in me, and I know that he is gracious and merciful. He was a God of second chances for Noah, the runaway prophet, the one who wanted nothing to do with God. He was the runaway, and God gave him a second chance. He turned back to the Lord. He saw the work of the Lord. Ooh, we need to know this today. That if you come to know the Lord, it is not because of anything that you have ever done in your life. There is not a feather that you can stick in your cap and call it macaroni and say that, there is something worthwhile in my life. There is something that I have done, that my righteous good deeds are the reason why I get to go to heaven, that I've done all this good stuff, and that is why God should accept me. Friends, you and I, if we open up the veil of our hearts, we would see just how lost and wicked at times we can be. Sometimes you ought to surprise yourself if you really looked in the mirror and said, is that really what I'm like? Is that really the things that I think? Is that really the stuff going on in my world? And friends, if you ever give your life to Christ, you have nothing to bring except that God is merciful and gracious and slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness. Amen. There's nothing, amen. There is nothing that we bring except for God's grace. And Jonah ate that up. He loved it. He loved that God would give me a second chance. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. He just loved every part of that God would just be willing to give him a second chance. That is what he knew. That is what he didn't want the Ninevites to know. Because he said, I ran away from you, God, because I did not want you to be merciful and gracious to them. I'm thankful for my second chances, but I don't want you, God, to give them a first chance. Second chances are great for me, but I don't want them to have a second chance. He ran away because he knew that God would be gracious to the throwaways. God would be gracious to the throwaways. There was a young lady. She had fallen into a life of prostitution. As she was living this life of prostitution, one of the things that she realized was that she could make more money in an hour by selling her 10-year-old girl than she could make all day long by herself. So day after day, and night after night, she began to just do that. She sold her little girl. Man came to her one time. He said, look, I'd like to buy an hour of your time. That was the rate that it was at that time. And so she's like, okay, let's do this. They went into a hotel, and she began to unclothe and everything else. Like, look, I don't want you to do that. I want to buy your time for an hour, and I want to just tell you about Jesus. And so he bought this hour of her time, knowing what she's been through, knowing the things that she was doing, especially with her daughter. He knew all these things, but he just wanted to tell her about a God who was gracious and merciful, abundant in loving kindness, who was slow to anger. And he just began to tell her about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it was a message that this dying and thirsty and hungry soul, this throwaway, needed in her life. And boy, she was so, you could tell her heart was just melting inside of her, until this man said, you know what, I want to invite you to come to our church, and you could hear more about the gospel. And her response was, church! Church! I'm not going to church. All I'll do if I go to church, they'll just make me feel worse than I already am. They'll just pour more condemnation upon me. I'm not going to church. And you know what? The same thing that happens with Jonah, where he wanted to just throw away that sinner of the worst kind. Boy, it happens so many times in our own lives. It even happens here at our own church at times, where you're like, no, we don't want that one or that kind or those folks. No, that's too much, or they're too much to deal with, or they've got too much of a baggage and past or whatever. Can I tell you, and I beg with you, and I plead with you, that I believe one thing about Westside Emmanuel Baptist Church, that we need to be, ought to be, strive to be, love to be a church that loves God and loves people. Amen? Now, what does that mean? It means people with baggage, and people with stuff, and people with a past, and people with a reputation, and people who are just longing to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. And friends, I need you to know today that you may not be perfect. You may have had more stuff going on in your life. You may have had more things that everybody in Bogalusa wants to say about you and think about you and all those things. But there in this church, there ought to be the grace of God for every person who just needs the love of Jesus Christ. That is what this church ought to be like. Amen? I mean, that we just love God and love people. But here, this guy, Jonah, hated the Ninevites so much that he didn't want God's grace to pour on them. Can you imagine? Just think about this for a moment. Could you imagine hating someone so much that you would not want them to experience the grace of God? Could you imagine despising being around someone so much that you would not want to see them, not want to talk to them, that you would never, ever want the Lord to forgive them? Could you imagine that ever happening in your life? What about that person on Facebook who just uses their little backward commented posts, and boy, you know they're saying something even though they ain't saying something, and you're probably sure it's talking straight about you. Can you want somebody like that to be blessed? See, God not only gave grace to you, but he even gave grace to them. What about that ex who ruined your life, or who you had so many troubles and you thought life would go in this direction, but instead you couldn't imagine God forgiving them, and you don't ever want God to bless them, and boy, it's just been too painful in your life to even think about that. But do you realize that the same God who is gracious to you is gracious to them as well? Or what about that abuser, that person who may physically or mentally or emotionally has or still does? And could you imagine that you know what, you need God's grace in the middle of those situations, but could you imagine God giving grace and mercy to somebody like that? Could you imagine the person who hurt you, that God not only gave grace to you, but he even would extend grace to them? Jonah wanted to just throw them away. God, how could you be merciful? How could you bless them? How could you be slow to anger? God, don't you know who those people are? Don't you know what those people have done? Don't you know how it has been in my life because of them? And you here today may have the same problem that Jonah had. God, I can imagine you being gracious to them. God, don't you understand the pain they put me through? God, don't you realize all of that? God says, you know what? I am still a God who is gracious not only to runaways, but even to throwaways. And you may be one or the other. You may be running away from God, or you have been thrown away by everybody else who says, that one does not deserve God's grace. That one does not deserve God's mercy. That one does not deserve God's forgiveness. Can I tell you, that one is each one of us, because none of us deserve God's grace or mercy or forgiveness. None of us, amen? None of us. My youngest daughter, she keeps it real with her dad. She keeps it real. And I keep it real with her too. We have an interesting, fun relationship. But one day, I'll let you kind of insight into my mind and my thoughts. This is like counseling session 101. I get to speak and you get to listen and we'll see what happens, all right? But there have been times where their mother will be eating somewhere on a Sunday after church, and so sometimes I'll text the kids. I'll be like, hey, where y'all eating at? If they're not with me that week. And so, you know what? Where y'all going to be? And I really do that because I don't necessarily want to be in the same environment. You know, she's a woman of God who loves her kids. She is a great lady. I'm happy for her. I really am happy for her. But I don't want to be around her. I don't need to be in that same environment. I'm okay with that. But they were at Yo-Yo's one day. And so I texted my baby girl and I said, you know what, where y'all eating? You know, we're kind of at Yo-Yo's parking lot. Are you guys there? And she's like, yeah, we're here. But you can come on in because, Dad, one day we're all going to be in heaven. Yeah. And in my mind, I was like, just shut up. But in my heart, it really, like, ooh, it was a herder. It's like one of them, like, Zorro kind of moves for my daughter. But it's really one of those situations where it's true. The same God who is gracious and abundant to you after all the times that you've run away from him, he is the same God who is not a discerner or a divider of persons, that he still wants to give grace and mercy to every throwaway in your life. I know there's some folks who have hurt you, who have abandoned you, who you feel it's like, I just cannot continue with them. But God is a God of the runaways and the throwaways. He even says in verse 3, this is how bad. Jonah had a severe case of being a bipolar believer. How do I know that? Verse 3 says, therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. He was willing to say, I'd rather die than see you be gracious and merciful to them. Man, one moment he's running away from God, the other moment he's swallowed up by the Lord and he's just down on his knees. But one moment he's preaching the gospel of Christ, and the next moment he is there and he's just saying, God, just take my life. He was so up and down, extreme from one way to the other. This was a guy who had no foundation whatsoever. He even goes on, and I'm not going to preach this part in verse 5 and following, but he goes on and he just sits outside the city gate because he wants to see what's going to happen. He is hoping Sodom and Gomorrah is about to fall down and rain down on this place of Nineveh. So he goes outside the city gate, he builds a little shelter, and all of a sudden God takes care of him. He puts a vine over his head, makes it all kind of cool. It's burning hot out there, and so he gets this little shelter and stuff. And then as the Lord's taking care of him, the next day dawn arises, and a worm comes and eats this whole shelter that was built. And then a scorching wind comes, and his old head is just on fire. And he's out there, he's complaining, and he's once again saying, I just want to just take my life, Lord. In verse 8, Lord, it's better for me to die than to live. But then I want you to focus real quick on verse 9. Because in Jonah chapter 4, verse 9, we get a picture of the heartbeat of God. In Jonah 4, verse 9, it says, then God said to Jonah, is it right for you to be angry about the plant? And he said, it is right for me to be angry enough to death. But the Lord said, you've had pity on the plant which you have not labored nor made it grow, which came up in the night and perished in the night. And should I not pity Nineveh, that great city in which are more than 100,000 and 120,000 persons who cannot discern between their right hand and their left, and much livestock? Verse 11, he says, should I not pity Nineveh? These folks who have no clue, they have no understanding, should I not pity these throwaways? Should I not pity these throwaways? Jonah, you know who I am, for I know, verse 3, that you are a gracious and merciful God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, one who relents from doing harm. Is anybody here thankful for second chances that God has given you? Amen? Isn't it good to know, second ain't even, we passed second when we were like 4 years old. Some of us are 10 billion. 10 quadrillion oogles or whatever it is. I mean, to infinity and beyond when it comes to the chances that God has given us. Now, we are thankful for that God could even use a runaway for one of the greatest revivals in all of recorded history. But if you're thankful for second chances, why would you want to deny someone a first chance? Why would you want to say, look, I'm mad if they get blessed? You got anybody like that? Boy, you've been trying to live for the Lord, get closer to the Lord, and they're out doing whatever they want to, and God just blesses them. They got a new car, they're with child now, and this is here and this is there, and God, I'm trying to live for you, and all of a sudden, you know what? God, how could you bless them? How could you give them a first chance? They don't deserve that. God, I don't want to see them happy. God, I'll even pray for them to suffer. I'll pray for them. I don't want to pray for them to be blessed. I'll pray for them to be suffered. They deserve to get knocked in the teeth. As it says in some of the Psalms, that you would bust their teeth out of their mouth. I mean, that's the prayer that I have. I don't want them to be blessed or forgiven. The Lord says, look, they would never deserve God's grace. Should I not pity them? You should never deserve God's grace. Should I not pity you? You see, here today we have some runaways and we have some throwaways. We've been preaching this book of Jonah, and we'll conclude it next week. We've been preaching on Jonah, and a lot of you in your life, you know that you've been running away from God's calling, God's responsibility, God, whatever He wants to do to get you closer to Him. You've just been turning away from that for so many years that used to be a loud, thunderous knock on your heart. And now it's like that little whisper, that faint whisper, and you're just turning it away, closing the door. Don't want to hear, don't want to listen, don't want to hear what God has to say. God still gives a second chance to the runaways. But we have some Ninevites here today too, because you're a throwaway. You've been thrown away by your family. You've been thrown away by people that you cared about. You've been thrown away by every person who's ever put a label on your life and said, this is what you are, and this is what you're not, and this is how you'll never be anything. And so some of us here are Ninevites. And God will look at each of us, whether you're a runaway or a throwaway. He'll look at your life and say, you know what, but I am a gracious God. I am merciful. I am abundant in loving kindness. I am here for you, even if you're lost in sin. God is a gracious God. This is a gracious church. And you can find grace today. You can find mercy today. You can find loving kindness today. So we have been on a journey through Jonah. We'll get done with that journey next week. I went in to the Golden Pear. I went in and they gave me that look, that you stay over there look. Your son-in-law even tried to get me to pay for his meal that day as well. I'm like, look at me, bro. And if anybody, I would have thought. No, there was no grace there. And some of you may not have bandages looking like the mummy up here and all. You may not have those on you that's falling apart in different places. You may not have bandages visibly, but you've been trying to carry bandages over your life for years. Because you've had one thing that's been cut, and one thing that is oozing, and one thing that is out there, and one thing that isn't perfect, and one thing that you just need to cover up because you don't want anybody to see it. You don't want anybody to look at you. You don't want anybody to worry about what your life is about. You've just been covering it up, covering up with church, with good works, covering up with people trying to think you're funny, or think you're smart, or think you're this, or think you're that. But in the end, if you take these bandages off, which I won't do, for those of you who are kind of squeamish this morning, if you take the bandage off, you see, I'm only wearing this for now. As soon as I get home, I'm going to take the bandages off because they need to breathe. They need to be free some. I need to put some more of that little spray stuff on there and burn the rest of my arm off as quick as I can. But being free is the only way for healing. If I kept it covered like this, it would slow down the healing process. At times, I need to take the bandage off and put some salve on it. Put some spray in some. My dad was like oatmeal. Somebody else said bleach. I've heard gasoline. All y'all DMSO folks, they're probably like, yeah, put some DMSO on it. It'll go right to your bones. And, so I've had all these little home remedies for, all the ways I can take care of it, just crazy stuff, just stuff all out the box. At times it would hurt because I can feel myself sweating and sticking to it right now. It's kind of gross inside my own body. But until you unravel it, you'll never find healing. And if you're a throwaway or a runaway, until you unravel and say, God, that's who I am. God, that's what I've been about. And until you unravel it, you know what? He had scars. And he still has scars. But they're scars of grace and mercy and loving kindness. And he shows them to you today so that you can say, this is a God that I could follow. Because for every one of my scars, he knows what that's like. He takes runaways and throwaways and keeps them every day. But you've got to unravel all the stuff and let him bring healing. Would you bow with me for a moment? As we bow together, my dear friend, this morning, Brother Wayland's going to lead us in a time of invitation. This morning, as he leads us in this time of invitation, are you a runaway? Run back to him. Are you a throwaway? God's going to give you a second chance today. A first chance to just surrender it all to Jesus. Father,
Friends, thank you for joining us today at Westside Emmanuel Baptist Church, the church that loves God and loves people. We hope you'll be able to join us this coming Sunday at 10:30 a.m. or 6 o'clock in the evening time. Wednesdays at 6 o'clock for our prayer service, and we also have youth and children's activities as well. We look forward to seeing you. Hope to meet you in person here in Bogalusa with Bogalusa on our heart. We hope to see you soon.